As the general election campaign ramps up and the political parties have begun releasing their proposals for various sectors in Malta, we have with us today Mr. Tony Zahra, the President of the Malta Hotels and Restaurants Association, to discuss the tourism sector, the policies, proposals being made, and also issues which are currently affecting it. Mr. Zahra, thank you very much for joining us today. Mr. Zahra, first of all, what do you make of the electoral proposals which have been made so far?
I think we can summarize it in saying, wow. And wow, insofar as I have never seen so many giveaways in my long life. I would like also to see somebody talking about how we're going to finance all these giveaways, because nobody's talking about how we're going to earn it before we can spend it.
Do you think the parties perhaps aren't really paying that much attention to what this going to cost in the long run? Is that something which you're feeling?
I think there is a campaign between the two parties as to who is going to give the most giveaways, but nobody is talking about where the money is going to come from.
And what about in terms of the tourism sector? We haven't seen that many proposals made. We've seen very, very few actually in that regard.
Quite. In terms of the tourism, it's perhaps a reflection of the state of the industry, which is we're in a reasonably good place. And we have got a record number of arrivals and a record amount of spend. Consequently, now we need to identify where we want to go. Vision 2050 was supposed to do that. I'm not so sure that it achieved it, but we now need to concentrate on getting a higher spend client to Malta.
You mentioned that there are a lot of giveaways being made. In your opinion, for the tourism sector, do you have any perhaps ideas or proposals which you would want to see the two parties focus on for the next legislature?
Yes, I think the main objective has to be that the spend per arrival has to go up. So we need to have that as a focus. Now, it's easy said, but more difficult to do. So what do we really need? We need more, we need less accommodation on the cheaper end of the market and more on the upper end of the market. We need to turn our main street, for example, in Valletta, we need to turn that into a luxury shopping destination. We need to avoid having Valletta as a food court, a massive food court. So this is the way that we attract higher spending people. I recently said to somebody, if I was a tourist here with a large budget and I wanted to impress my wife and go and spend 5,000 euros on a piece of whatever in Malta, I would find a great deal of difficulty in finding a shop to do that.
And what do you think needs to be done in order to bring about this change, particularly in Valletta? Are we talking here about incentives? Are we talking about I don't know, disincentives for more food establishments? What do you have in mind?
Absolutely. In the old days, when I was living in the UK, you would have what was called a parade of shops. So you would have a butcher, a news agent, and various other shops. If the butcher shops closed, you couldn't change it into a news agent which was next door to you. You had to have it as a butcher shop so that you have a selection of shops. Now, if you go down Valletta today, you will find that there are many restaurants offering pasta, pizza, pasta, but very few offering something different.
Going on to a particular proposal which was made by the Prime Minister to discuss with social partners the right for employees to ask employers to switch to remote working, flexi-time or a compressed week. First of all, what do you make of this proposal and what kind of impact do you think it could have on the tourism sector?
Well, In reality, there are certain jobs where you can't do remote working. As a joke, somebody said that he was flying on a plane and he heard the pilot saying, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your pilot speaking. Today I'm remote working, and have a good flight." So you can't have remote working if you're a receptionist or if you're a waiter. So within the hospitality industry, remote working is very difficult. Now, there might be a few jobs where you can do remote working if you're doing back of the house, and you're doing reservations. You might be able to do remote working, but in reality, most of our jobs cannot be done by remote working.
But then the flexi time or the compressed week argument could come into play, for example. Is that something which...
Well, flexi time, we've already got flexi time because people in our industry work 7 days a week and they get to work different shifts, different times of day. So there's already the flexi time. It's a very flexible industry in our industry because you can give people days off when they want them without upsetting the production, because you put some other people in there.
Is there any particular proposal which has been made by the two parties so far which has particularly struck you as being good or bad?
I don't see anything there which is new to the industry. We have a number of challenges coming our way. And those have to be addressed. But I think this is the time of year when everybody has smiles and everybody has good news, and nobody wants to talk about the difficulties that are coming our way.
In fact, you're mentioning difficulties, and I wanted to talk to you a bit about the geopolitical situation and perhaps the effect which you think or it is having on the tourism sector in Malta. First of all, have you heard of any issues with regards to cancellations or anything of the sort due to rising fuel prices abroad, for instance?
Yeah, I'll give you an overview on the situation. The first impact on us was more positive than negative, because we had people that were going to Cyprus, for example, that switched to Malta. Some people that were going to Turkey that switched to Malta. So we had some positives. The negatives were we had some groups coming from Australia, Middle East, and even America, which postponed rather than cancelled. So that was the negative side of it. But this is short term, over the next month or so. If the Straits of Hormuz are not opened and the oil starts flowing out again, then we're all going to have problems.
While we're talking about the issues which the tourism sector has been facing, there were some legislative changes which were introduced recently with regards to restrictions, with regards to the height policy, for example, for hotels, etc., and also restrictions for short-term rentals. You've welcomed the legislative changes regarding the short-term rentals, but do you think what was implemented has gone far enough?
Look, we've been talking a lot about short-term rentals, and I've explained it as follows. If I was living in a flat and there were 10 apartments in that complex, and apartment number 6 decided to turn that into a butcher shop, people won't like it. Because how is it possible that a residential property has now become a commercial property? Short-term rentals is a commercial activity, and therefore there should be the same rigorous requirements of a butcher shop, being an apartment being turned into a butcher shop, as well as an apartment being turned into short-term rentals. So I don't think that the legislative requirements have gone long in the right direction. I think there should be much more to ensure that the commercial activity is in fact regulated.
So a step in the right direction, but more needs to be done.
A step in the right direction, but no more needs to be done.
And what, in your view, should be done? What more, in your view, should be done? Like, do you have some examples, for example?
Yes, clearly, short-term rentals are having a major impact on the level of tourists that we're getting to Malta. So, in terms of activity, if we want to increase the spend per person, then we have got to provide the product that will match those requirements. If you provide a product which is a low-value product, you're going to get low-value clients. If you provide a product which is a high-value, you're going to get high-value clients.
Is this? Are you saying here that you don't think the short-term rental market is beneficial for Malta, or is it a case of there should be more quality control, for example?
No, the short-term rental is an issue not only for Malta, it's an issue everywhere. And one of the things that has happened abroad and is happening in Malta is it is pushing up the prices of property and pushing out the residents from the areas which those tourists come to experience. So we might finish off with a place where, in fact, there are no residents and only tourists. And then what do they come there for?
What were on the topic regarding the numbers of tourists? Last year we hit around 4 million, right? Tourists which have arrived. But over-tourism is an issue which has been debated in the country for quite a while. In the past, you've dismissed the idea of limiting the number of tourist arrivals and argued that management, not limitations, is the key to sustaining the sector. Do you still believe that there shouldn't be any limits?
I still believe that there should not be any limit, because I do not believe that the government should interfere in the market. But the government should regulate the market. So how do you regulate the market? If you create overcapacity in anything, then the market is going to suffer. So government as a regulator should say we are going to limit the number of, for example, pharmacies.
Yes.
There's a limit to the number of pharmacies
that you can have.
Yes. You know. So why are we limiting? Why are we limiting pharmacies, and why are we not using the same yardstick in the tourism industry?
You're saying to limit the number of hotels, for example.
You can limit the number of beds available. Yes.
That's an interesting proposal, actually. But would you just limit that to hotels, or would you expand that also to the wider tourism sector, like restaurants, for example? Or
absolutely. You know, I mean, you do that also not only by regulation, but by incentives. For example, I have been talking a lot about having a balanced economy. A balanced economy means that you have to have not only the tourism sector or the financial sector, but you have to have manufacturing. Now, you do that by incentivizing the area that you want people to invest in, and possibly making less incentives on those that you don't want them to invest in. So use that method of incentivizing in areas where you want the investments, and not incentivizing the areas where you don't want the investment.
When you're talking about limiting, the idea of limiting the number of hotels, that could bring about arguments regarding perhaps favoritism towards current hotel owners versus those who might want to build hotels in the future. Whereas limiting the overall number of tourists, for example, would still have the same effect in terms of limiting tourism numbers.
No. You limit by the capacity. If you're going to allow overcapacity, what is going to happen is there will be a race to fill in the empty beds, and that will be on a price basis. And consequently, your possibility of offering a good service will decrease with the amount of money that you're charging. So it's not a question of limiting the numbers coming in, it's limiting the supply.
When it comes to the capacity of Malta for the number of tourists that we're seeing, do you think we've reached a point where something like you're proposing has to be done, or should we aim for, let's say, beds which could handle, I don't know, more than we're coming during the summer period? I'm talking now.
Well, the service industry, by its own nature, requires people to operate. You can't bring in AI or because the service industry requires. Okay, you can. There are certain areas where you can, but we're talking about small percentages, not large percentages. So we really need now to be thinking differently. But we're not going to think differently. If we're going to think in terms of what we've done in the past, then we're going to have a problem. And don't forget, the size of the island is not going to grow. It is 331 square kilometers, and that's just what it's going to remain at.
Now, the argument has been to increase tourism in the shoulder months and in the off-peak season rather than during the summer season. We've seen some success in that, especially in the shoulder months.
We have had a lot of success, not some. We have had a lot of success in increasing the numbers in what were termed the shoulder months now are part of the peak months, because in the old days we used to think of the shoulder months being September, October, and April, May, June. These are no longer shoulder months, they are the peak months. So we have had a lot of success in doing it, because even January nowadays is a good month.
But even by expanding like you said, there's been a lot of success in the shoulder months, and we are seeing more and more tourists coming to the island. Do you think we're going to reach 5 million tourists a year soon? And should we be aiming for those kind of numbers?
Well, look, again, we are a lobby group. We are not the government. We are not the executives. You know, the government has to be the deciding factor. The question is not should we be aiming to get 5 million. The question is what will be the impact on the island if we get 5 million. We did a carrying capacity report some 3 years ago and identified the areas where we have difficulties. Some of them we could possibly work on and solve, but others it's impossible. For example, when we did the carrying capacity report, it indicated that our beaches were saturated at that point in time. This was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We're not going to create new beaches. You know, and if they were saturated at a point in time when we had about 3.5 million or 3 million, with 5 million, what are we going to do? Build double-deckers on the beach?
But this is also adds to the argument that if we want to attract quality tourists, this is not something that they're going to be looking for, basically. The idea of packed beaches, public transport, which is, or rather streets which are filled with traffic.
I'll give you an example. You know, if you get a one person spending 100 euros per day, you have the impact of one person. If you get 10 persons spending 10 euros each, and you're earning 100 euros, you get the impact of 10 persons, not one person. Now, which one would you rather have? And I keep telling everybody, you can only make money with the people that have money.
We've seen actually abroad there have been protests or backlash against the tourism sector in certain countries because of bad management. I'm here going to mention Spain as an example, Portugal as another. Do you fear, if things keep going as they are, that this could be something we could see in Malta, or is the tourism sector so important for the country that you don't think we'd see that kind of backlash?
I don't fear it, because we have got very good cooperation and close arrangements with government and with the security services. In fact, we had meetings only yesterday with the security services about how to better manage our product. We are going to have now a specific squad for Parcheville, which will handle Parcheville only, and they will be permanently placed in Parcheville. Last year, we were very strong proponents of fines on the spot. It took us some time to convince the executive, the government, to introduce fines on the spot, but it's coming. So our proactive meetings with government and senior officials tend to solve problems before they occur.
But even when it comes to the sheer numbers of tourists we're seeing on beaches, etc., it's a bit of an could be an inconvenience for a number of Maltese. I know people, for example, who have stopped going to the beach just because they're so packed in summer. Complaints that they don't use public transport because public transport is so packed in summer. Walking down Republic Street during the summer months. It's an issue just because of the sheer amount of people that you see there as well. I mean, you don't think that this might result in some sort of backlash down the line if numbers continue to grow? Well,
I think as long as it's well managed, I don't see that as a problem. And this fines on the spot is going to be a very good way of controlling any antisocial behavior. I was asked yesterday, what happens if somebody comes around and says, well, I don't have any money? Well, we have already an answer. If you don't have any money, you come down to the police station, you spend the night there, you go and get your bags, and you're out of the country the next morning. That should solve a lot of the problems.
Okay. And what about the table and chairs issue on the street, for example? That's another complaint you hear a lot of people complaining about. Is this an enforcement issue? This
is an enforcement issue, and regrettably in Malta, enforcement and Malta cannot be said in the same sentence. We are a country where enforcement doesn't happen, because if I try to enforce anything, you know, I will call my cousin who knows the driver of the minister, who will talk to the minister, and it then gets reversed.
But what do you think needs to be? Is it a staffing issue, you think? Is it the fact, do we need to be stricter, do you think? Or is it?
Apply the law. I can tell you, I know for a fact that the regulator is doing his job, but occasionally gets held back from the executive.
What do you mean by that? And have you heard complaints of the government holding back the authorities from doing what they're meant to be doing?
I have explained it to you in English, so I won't go further than that.
Okay. And is this something you've heard frequently as happening? Or?
Well, you know, I don't think it's recent, because recent in my case could be about 30 years ago.
Fair enough. And going forward, what do you think needs to be the aim, perhaps, of the tourism sector for, let's say, the next 5-10 years, looking down the line? What should be the overall
Any activity that takes place in Malta should be for the benefit of the Maltese people. If it is not for the benefit of the Maltese people, then don't do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zahra.
Thank you.
Thank you.